Have you ever noticed how the same event can send one person into a spiral of anger while another stays perfectly calm? Why do we react so differently to life's challenges? And more importantly, can we ever truly control those reactions? The answer lies in a practice that's been shaping human resilience for over 2,000 years, Stoicism. This isn't just philosophy, it's the oldest psychological toolkit on Earth, designed to help us decode the emotional triggers that hijack our peace of mind. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor who ruled Rome at its height, put it simply, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That power is what we're about to explore together. Think about the last time frustration or anxiety took over your thoughts. Maybe it was a rude comment, a missed opportunity, or a plan that fell apart. In that moment, it probably felt like your emotions were calling the shots. But what if you could step back and see those reactions for what they really are, not uncontrollable forces, but signals waiting to be understood? Stoicism teaches us that our emotional responses aren't random. They're rooted in deep-seated beliefs about what we think we need, deserve, or fear losing. And here's the game changer. Once we recognize those patterns, we can rewrite them. This video is a journey into the heart of that ancient wisdom. We'll uncover how Stoic principles tested by time, war, and everyday struggles can help you dissect emotional triggers with the precision of a surgeon. Imagine being able to pause when tension rises, to ask yourself, "Why does this bother me?" and to choose your response instead of being swept away by habit. That's the resilience the Stoics mastered, and it's not about suppressing feelings, it's about clarity. It's about realizing that the world doesn't upset us, our judgments about the world do. By the end, you'll have practical tools to transform emotional turbulence into unshakable calm. So let's begin where all real change starts, with understanding. So what exactly are these emotional triggers we keep reacting to? From a Stoic lens, they're not the events themselves, like a cutting remark or a traffic jam, but the invisible judgments we attach to them. Modern psychology might describe triggers as automatic responses wired into our brains, but Stoicism takes it deeper. It's not the outside world that controls us, but the meaning we assign to it. Epictetus, the former slave who became one of history's greatest Stoic teachers, put it perfectly. It's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. Picture this: two colleagues receive the same critical feedback at work. One spirals into defensiveness, convinced their worth is under attack. The other leans in, curious, treating it as data to improve. The trigger wasn't the criticism, it was each person's silent belief about what that criticism meant. This is where Stoicism becomes revolutionary. While modern self-help often focuses on managing emotions after they erupt, the Stoics teach us to examine the fuel before the fire starts. That moment when your pulse quickens or your stomach knots, that's your brain interpreting an event through old, often unconscious rules. "This shouldn't be happening," or "I can't handle this." But here's the twist: those rules aren't facts. They're habits of thought, often borrowed from past experiences or societal expectations. When a friend's text goes unanswered, the trigger isn't the silence, it's the story you tell yourself about it. "They're ignoring me" feels truer than "they're likely busy," not because it is, but because your mind defaults to familiar scripts. Let's make this practical. Think of the last time something small, a cancelled plan, a misplaced key, sent your mood plummeting. The Stoics would say that frustration wasn't caused by the event, but by your unmet expectation. You believed the plan was set in stone, or the keys should have been right where you left them. Reality had other ideas. This gap between expectation and reality is where most emotional triggers lie. The good news, you get to redraw that map. Next time irritation flares, pause and ask, what unspoken rule just got broken? That's the first step to disarming the trigger entirely. The Stoics had a radical way of cutting through emotional chaos. They called it the dichotomy of control. Picture a simple line drawn in the sand. On one side, everything within your power, your thoughts, your actions, your judgments. On the other, everything else, the weather, other people's opinions, flight delays, the past. Most of our emotional turmoil comes from blurring that line, from pouring energy into things we can't change while neglecting the agency we do have. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who advised emperors, put it bluntly, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. When we rage against traffic or obsess over someone's disapproval, we're not reacting to the event itself. We're fighting an unwinnable battle against reality, demanding the uncontrollable bend to our will. Here's the paradox: the more we fixate on what we can't control, the more powerless we feel. Think about the last time you refreshed your inbox waiting for a reply, or replayed a conversation wishing you'd said something different. That mental loop is like gripping a handful of water. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips away. But when you shift focus to your own response, how you'll adapt, what you'll learn, the mindset you'll choose, something extraordinary happens. The emotional trigger loses its grip. Let's take a modern example. You're running late, stuck in gridlock, and your anxiety spikes. The Stoic response isn't to pretend you're not frustrated. It's to ask, can I make this traffic move faster? If the answer's no, and it always is, your only real choice is how you use the time. Listen to an audiobook. Call a friend, practice deep breathing. That's the pivot from helplessness to agency. Try this exercise right now. Grab a sheet of paper and draw 2 columns. In the first, list your frequent emotional triggers, things like rude comments, long lines, or tech glitches. Now, cross out anything that falls outside your control. What's left? Only your reactions. That blank space is where your power lies. The next time a trigger hits, pause and hear Epictetus' voice in your head. Is this within my control? If not, redirect that energy. The traffic won't clear faster because you're angry, but your mood, that's yours to steer. This isn't about passive acceptance. It's about strategic focus. The Stoics weren't suggesting we ignore injustice or avoid improvement. They were teaching us to invest our finite energy where it can actually move the needle. When you stop wrestling with the immovable, you free up stamina to change what you can, starting with your own mind. One of the most powerful tools in the Stoic toolkit is something called cognitive distancing, the art of creating space between an event and your reaction to it. Marcus Aurelius described it as taking a step back or pausing for a breath before letting emotions dictate your next move. Think of it like this: when you're standing too close to a painting, all you see are blurry brushstrokes. But take a few steps back and the whole picture comes into focus. That's what cognitive distancing does for your emotions. It doesn't suppress them. It gives you the clarity to respond instead of react. Imagine this scenario. You open your inbox and see an email from a coworker that reads, "We need to talk about your recent work." Your stomach drops. Your pulse quickens. Your mind races with worst-case scenarios. The old script kicks in: they're unhappy with me, or I must have messed up. Without cognitive distancing, you might fire back a defensive reply or spend hours agonizing. But what if instead you paused? What if you asked yourself, what else could this mean? Maybe they want to collaborate. Maybe they have feedback, not criticism. That tiny gap between trigger and response is where your power lies. This practice isn't about denying your emotions, it's about understanding them. The Stoics knew that our first interpretation of events is often the loudest, not the most accurate. By creating that pause, you disrupt the autopilot of anger, fear, or insecurity. You give yourself room to question whether your initial reaction aligns with reality. And here's the key: this isn't just philosophy. It's a muscle you can strengthen. Start small. The next time someone cuts you off in traffic or your Wi-Fi crashes mid-meeting, resist the urge to snap. Take 3 deep breaths. Ask yourself, is my reaction helping? That pause might feel unnatural at first, but with time, it becomes your default. Try this exercise today. Pick one routine frustration, a long line, a noisy neighbor, a delayed text reply, and practice cognitive distancing. Notice the story you're telling yourself about it, then challenge it. Is there another explanation, a more useful way to frame it? Every time you create that space, you're rewriting your emotional reflexes. And that's how you go from being at the mercy of your triggers to being the architect of your calm. Amofati, the Latin phrase meaning love of fate, is where Stoicism takes its most radical turn. It's not just about accepting life's challenges, it's about embracing them as if you'd chosen them yourself. The philosopher Nietzsche, who admired the Stoics, put it this way: "My formula for greatness in a human being is Amofati. That one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity." Imagine looking at every setback, every frustration, even every heartbreak, and saying, "This too is part of my story, and I wouldn't erase it." That's the mindset shift that transforms emotional triggers from obstacles into fuel. Take Seneca, the Stoic thinker who was exiled to Corsica by the Emperor Claudius. Banished to a remote island, stripped of status and comfort, he could have drowned in resentment. Instead, he wrote letters describing how exile taught him resilience, how solitude sharpened his mind. Years later, when recalled to Rome, he wasn't just surviving, he was thriving, armed with wisdom forged in hardship. That's Amofati in action, the refusal to see any event as purely bad, but as raw material for growth. Now apply this to your own life. Think of a recent setback, a rejection, a mistake, a plan that unraveled. Your first reaction might have been frustration or disappointment, but what if you asked, how could this actually serve me? Maybe that job rejection pushed you toward a better fit. Maybe the argument exposed a boundary you needed to set. Even pain carries information. The key is to stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What can this reveal?" Here's a practice to try. Pick one challenge you're facing right now. Write down 3 ways it could strengthen you. Maybe it's teaching patience, revealing hidden priorities, or forcing creativity. This isn't toxic positivity, it's strategic reframing. The traffic jam becomes time to reflect. The criticism becomes a chance to clarify your vision. Amofati doesn't mean pretending hardships don't sting. It means trusting they're carving you into someone wiser. When you start seeing triggers this way, something shifts. The rude comment, a reminder to cultivate inner stability. The failed project, a lesson in what truly matters. Even grief in time can deepen your capacity for compassion. The Stoics weren't naive. They knew suffering is real, but they also knew we get to decide what it means. So the next time life throws you off course, whisper Amofati like a mantra. Love your fate not because it's easy, but because it's yours, and within it lies the blueprint for your unshakable self. Premeditatio Malorum, the Stoic practice of premeditation of evils, sounds grim at first glance. Why dwell on potential problems before they happen? But here's the counterintuitive truth. By mentally rehearsing life's worst-case scenarios, you strip them of their power to shock or derail you. Seneca, who faced exile, chronic illness, and political betrayal, wrote, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." This isn't pessimism, it's emotional inoculation. Think of it like a fire drill. No one expects the building to burn down, but practicing evacuation means panic won't cloud judgment if smoke fills the hallway. Take public speaking, a fear so common it outranks death in some surveys. Imagine you're about to give a presentation and your mind spirals. What if I forget my lines? What if they laugh at me? The untrained reaction is to avoid thinking about it, which only leaves you defenseless when nerves strike. But the Stoic approach flips the script. You'd mentally walk through the worst possible outcome, stumbling over words, facing blank stares, even hearing whispers. Then you'd ask, could I survive that? Of course you could, and once you've faced that fear in your mind, the actual event loses its fangs. This practice works because it exposes a hidden flaw in how we process anxiety. We treat potential hardships as abstract monsters until they're suddenly real, and we're unprepared. Premeditatio Malorum turns those shadows into concrete scenarios you can dissect. Suppose you're terrified of job interviews. Instead of vague dread, picture the toughest questions, the awkward silences, even rejection. Now craft responses. Rejection, it redirects you to better opportunities. Tough questions, they reveal what to study next time. By the time you walk into the actual interview, you've already navigated the mental minefield. Try this today. Pick one upcoming challenge, a difficult conversation, a travel delay, a project critique. Close your eyes and vividly imagine it going wrong. Feel the discomfort, then strategize. How would you adapt? What's the lesson hidden there? Like a Stoic version of visualization, you're not attracting disaster, you're building resilience. Because when you've stood eye to eye with your fears in advance, reality's surprises feel more like puzzles than threats. And that's how you turn anticipation from a source of dread into a tool of mastery. At the core of Stoic emotional mastery lies a practice called the Discipline of Assent, the moment between receiving an impression and deciding whether to accept it as truth. Epictetus, who taught that men are disturbed not by things but by the views they take of them, compared this mental space to a gatekeeper guarding the entrance to your mind. Imagine someone bumps into you on the street without apologizing. Your first impression might scream, they disrespected me, but the Stoic pause asks, is that fact or interpretation? That split-second interrogation changes everything. Take friendship as an example. When a close friend goes silent for days, it's easy to jump to conclusions, they're avoiding me, or I must have offended them. These aren't observations, they're stories we've authored. The Discipline of Assent teaches us to strip those narratives bare. Could their phone be broken? Are they overwhelmed at work? The silence itself is neutral. The suffering comes from the meaning we stamp onto it. This isn't about naive optimism. It's about recognizing how often we confuse our mental projections with reality. Here's how to practice this today. Pick a recurring assumption you make, maybe, my boss's short email means they're unhappy, or if I'm not productive, I'm failing. Next time that thought arises, treat it like a suspicious package. Unwrap it slowly. Ask, what evidence do I actually have? What alternative explanations exist? Epictetus urged his students to say to every troubling impression, you are just an impression and not at all the thing you claim to represent. That mental friction, the space between stimulus and response, is where your freedom lies. Consider how often we grant automatic authority to our knee-jerk reactions. Someone cuts you off in traffic and instantly they're a jerk. A project stalls and you're a fraud. The Discipline of Assent interrupts this mental autopilot. It's not about suppressing emotions but scrutinizing their origins. When you feel irritation bubbling up, play detective. Is this feeling based on facts or inherited scripts? The more you question your initial impressions, the more you'll notice how many were never yours to begin with, just echoes of old wounds or societal noise. Try this exercise tonight. Reflect on one assumption you've carried today, perhaps, "I need approval to be valuable," or "chaos means I'm losing control." Write it down, then cross-examine it like a witness in court. Where did this belief originate? Does it hold up under scrutiny? You might discover that what felt like an immutable truth is just a habit of thought, one you can choose to release. That's the power of the discipline of assent, turning emotional triggers into invitations to reclaim your narrative. Marcus Aurelius never intended his journal, the now famous Meditations, to be published. Those pages were his private training ground where he dissected daily triggers and realigned his thoughts with Stoic wisdom. What if you had that same tool? Not just for venting emotions, but for reverse engineering them. Stoic journaling isn't about recording events, it's about excavating the hidden beliefs that turn ordinary moments into emotional earthquakes. Think of it like an archaeologist brushing dust off ancient artifacts. Each time you write down a reaction, you're uncovering the invisible rules that govern your responses. Here's how it works in practice. Next time frustration or anxiety flares, maybe after a tense meeting or a social media comparison spiral, open a notebook and divide your entry into 3 parts. First, the event itself, just the facts stripped of interpretation. My coworker interrupted me in front of the team. Next, your raw reaction. I felt humiliated, then angry. My face got hot and I shut down for the rest of the meeting. Now comes the Stoic pivot. Ask, which principle applies here? Maybe it's Epictetus' reminder that we control only our own actions, not others. Or Seneca's insight that anger often masks deeper vulnerability. This isn't about judging your reaction, it's about tracing its roots. Let's make this tangible. Imagine you journal about a friend canceling plans last minute. Your initial entry might read, "They blew me off again. They don't value my time." But when you apply the Stoic lens, deeper layers emerge. Perhaps your trigger wasn't the cancellation, but an unspoken expectation that plans equal care, or the story you told yourself about being low priority. That's where the magic happens. By naming these subconscious scripts, you drain their power. Steal a page from Marcus' method. His journals alternated between fierce self-correction and gentle reminders. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, "The people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant," not to condemn others, but to prepare his own compassion. Your journal can do the same. After a difficult interaction, write the person's possible motivations generously. Maybe that curt email came from stress, not disdain. This mental reframe doesn't excuse poor behavior. It frees you from taking it personally. Tonight, try this starter template. Grab any notebook and title today's entry with one triggering moment. Describe it factually, then unpack your emotional response like a scientist observing data. Finally, pick one Stoic principle to apply, even if it's just asking, "What part of this was truly within my control?" Over time, patterns will emerge. You'll spot the same fears camouflaged in different scenarios, the same expectations setting you up for frustration. And with that awareness comes choice. The next time a similar trigger arises, you won't just feel it, you'll understand it. And understanding is the first step to mastery. Journaling like a Stoic isn't about dwelling on the past. It's about creating a playbook for the future. Those pages become your training logs, proving emotional triggers aren't forces of nature, they're habits of thought. And habits can be rewritten. Marcus Aurelius had a habit of looking at life from what he called the view from above, a mental exercise where you zoom out far beyond your immediate circumstances until the entire world unfolds beneath you like a map. Picture yourself floating high above the earth, watching cities shrink to specks, Oceans become thin blue lines, and mountains flatten into wrinkles on the planet's surface. From that vantage point, how significant does your current frustration feel? The coworker who dismissed your idea, the slow grocery line, the unanswered text, these are barely visible against the vast tapestry of human existence. This isn't about diminishing your feelings, it's about revealing their true scale. Think of the last time a minor disagreement snowballed in your mind. Maybe it was a spat over chores or a snarky comment online. In the moment, it loomed large, consuming your attention. But imagine revisiting that same conflict from the perspective of a year from now, or a decade. Would it still merit the energy you poured into it? The Stoics used this technique not to avoid emotions, but to anchor them in reality. When we're drowning in details, the view from above pulls us back to the surface, gasping with clarity. Here's how to practice it today. Next time stress tightens your chest, close your eyes for 30 seconds. Visualize your neighborhood from 100 feet up, then 1,000, then further, until continents come into view. Notice how small your street appears. Now locate yourself in that panorama. Whatever's weighing on you, a missed deadline, a social slight, is just one thread in an endless weave. This exercise isn't escapism, it's recalibration. By seeing your struggles as part of a larger whole, you drain their power to overwhelm you. Marcus wrote in his journals about watching the infinite span of time and the multitudes of souls to remember his problems were neither unique nor eternal. Try applying this to a real-life trigger. That person who cut you off in traffic from 10,000 feet. They're just another rushing speck in the stream of humanity. The project setback, a blip in your lifelong arc of growth. The view from above doesn't erase challenges, it puts them in conversation with everything else. What makes this technique so potent is its ability to reveal what truly matters. When you mentally ascend high enough, only two things remain visible: the people you love and the values you defend to the end. Everything else, the petty grievances, the temporary setbacks, blurs into background noise. So tonight, before sleep, take 5 minutes to hover above your day. Review its tensions from that elevated perch. You might find that what felt like a crisis at ground level was merely dust on the lens, easily wiped clean with a shift in perspective. Stoic empathy might sound like a contradiction. Weren't these ancient philosophers all about self-control and detachment? But here's the surprise. Stoicism teaches that understanding others isn't just kind, it's strategic. When someone's behavior triggers you, the quickest way to disarm that reaction isn't to suppress your feelings or confront them. It's to ask one simple question: what unseen battle might they be fighting? Seneca, who endured betrayal and exile, wrote, "Every person you meet is fighting a hard war you know nothing about." That shift in perspective doesn't excuse poor behavior, it liberates you from taking it personally. Picture this: your coworker snaps at you in a meeting. Your instinct might scream, "They're disrespecting me," but the Stoic pause invites you to consider alternatives. Maybe they're grappling with a sick child at home or their own job insecurity. This isn't about playing detective or making excuses, it's about recognizing that hurt people often hurt people. By attributing their actions to circumstance rather than malice, you create an emotional buffer. The comment might still sting, but it won't poison your day. Try this reframe the next time someone cuts you off in traffic. Instead of muttering, "Jerk," imagine they're rushing to the hospital. Even if they're not, that momentary generosity short-circuits the anger spiral. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, reminding himself that irritating people were like thorns on a rose, an inevitable part of life. His advice: when someone does you wrong, immediately consider what good or harm they thought would come of it. Most cruelty isn't calculated, It's clumsy, born of fear or ignorance. Here's the paradox: the more you practice understanding others' triggers, the fewer your own will control you. That rude barrister, maybe they've been on their feet for 10 hours. The friend who forgot your birthday, they might be drowning in deadlines. This doesn't mean tolerating toxicity. It means distinguishing between intentional harm and human frailty. Stoic empathy isn't weakness, it's emotional armor. When you stop interpreting every slight as a personal attack, you reclaim your peace. So tonight, pick one interaction that bothered you today. Replay it, but this time, invent 3 generous explanations for the other person's behavior. Notice how the story changes when you zoom out from me versus them to all of us doing our best. That's the Stoic secret. Compassion isn't just for others, it's the key to unlocking your own freedom. Negative visualization is the Stoic practice of deliberately contemplating loss, not to dwell in fear, but to sharpen your appreciation for what you have right now. While Premeditatio Malorum prepares you for potential hardships, negative visualization deepens your gratitude for the ordinary miracles already present in your life. Epictetus, who began life as a slave, understood this intimately. He wrote, "Remind yourself that what you love is mortal, that what you love is not your own." At first glance, that sounds bleak, but here's the alchemy hidden within it. When you pause to imagine life without your health, your relationships, or even your morning coffee, those everyday blessings suddenly glow brighter. Take a simple ritual like sharing dinner with someone you love. Most nights it might feel routine until you picture the table empty, the chair vacant. Suddenly, the clink of silverware becomes music. Their laughter turns priceless. This isn't morbid, it's clarifying. The Stoics weren't suggesting we live in constant dread of loss. They were teaching us to hold life loosely enough to savor it fully. Seneca put it best: enjoy present pleasures in such a way as not to injure future ones. By periodically confronting impermanence, we stop taking the present for granted. Try this tonight. Before you go to sleep, reflect on 3 things you normally overlook: your ability to walk, the roof over your head, a friend who always replies to your texts. Now close your eyes and imagine waking up tomorrow without them. Notice how your chest tightens. That discomfort isn't something to run from, it's a compass pointing you toward what truly matters. When you reopen your eyes, those ordinary gifts will feel anything but ordinary. This practice isn't about manufacturing guilt for not being grateful enough. It's about waking up to the reality that everything is on loan. Your job, your hobbies, even the people dearest to you, none are permanent. But that realization doesn't have to paralyze you. It can propel you to put down your phone during conversations, to say the thing you've been holding back, to linger an extra moment when hugging someone goodbye. Negative visualization strips away the illusion of forever, leaving you with the raw truth. Right now is all we're guaranteed. And when you live like that, when you scrub the familiar until it shines new, you don't just survive life. You fall in love with it. There's a famous story about Cato, the Stoic statesman, that still echoes through the centuries. During a political debate, an opponent publicly insulted him, not just once, but repeatedly hurling personal attacks meant to provoke humiliation or rage. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, waiting for the fiery comeback, but Cato stood perfectly still, his face as unreadable as stone. When asked later why he hadn't retaliated, he replied, "I refuse to compete with someone whose behavior is beneath me." That's the art of non-reaction in its purest form. Not the absence of feeling, but the conscious choice not to let another person's actions dictate your own. Fast forward to today, and the same principle applies every time you scroll through social media. Imagine posting a thoughtful comment, only to have a stranger tear it apart with snark. Your fingers itch to type a cutting reply, but here's what the Stoics understood. When you engage with pettiness, you temporarily become its student. Every clickbait argument, every passive-aggressive tweet is essentially someone tossing you an emotional grenade and waiting to see if you'll catch it. Non-reaction isn't weakness, it's the ultimate power move. By refusing to play, you reveal the provocation for what it is: noise. This isn't about bottling up emotions or pretending insults don't sting. It's about recognizing that your silence can be louder than any comeback. Think of a chess player who ignores their opponent's taunts and stays focused on the board. Their restraint isn't passive, it's strategic. Every unspoken word is energy saved for what truly matters. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." In other words, don't let someone else's chaos rewrite your character. Here's your challenge today. Pick one encounter where you'd normally react: a snippy coworker, a condescending relative, an online stranger, and practice Cotto's restraint. Not with resentment, but with amused detachment. Picture their words as leaves tossed into a river, floating past without changing its course. Notice how much lighter you feel when you're not carrying the weight of every provocation. Because the truth is, most insults aren't even about you. They're projections, insecurities, or bad days disguised as personal attacks. When you stop handing people the remote control to your emotions, you reclaim something priceless: your peace. And here's the secret the Stoics knew: non-reaction isn't just for others' benefit, it's a gift to your future self. Every time you choose silence over strife, you're strengthening a mental muscle. Soon, what once would have derailed you becomes background static, unworthy of your attention, let alone your anger. So the next time someone tries to pull you into their storm, channel Cotto. Stand firm in your calm. Let their words land like feathers on stone, and watch how quickly the wind dies down when it has nothing to push against. Most of our suffering comes from living in two places at once: physically here, mentally trapped in yesterday's regrets or tomorrow's worries. The Stoics knew this 20 centuries before mindfulness became a buzzword. Epictetus put it bluntly: there is only one way to happiness, to cease worrying about things beyond the power of our will. That's not passive resignation. It's laser focus on where your agency actually lies: this breath, this choice, this moment. Modern mindfulness teaches awareness of the present. Stoicism adds why it matters. When you anchor yourself in the now, you're not just reducing stress, you're reclaiming sovereignty over your attention. Consider how anxiety about an upcoming meeting hijacks your afternoon. The event itself might last an hour, but the mental rehearsal, imagining stumbles, anticipating criticism, steals days of peace. The Stoic remedy isn't to ignore preparation, but to distinguish between useful planning and useless forecasting. Preparation lives in the present: researching, practicing, organizing. Worry is a tax you pay on disasters that never arrive. Marcus Aurelius wrote his reminders not in some distant retreat, but amid wars and political intrigue. Confine yourself to the present. He wasn't dismissing the future, he was refusing to mortgage today for it. Let's bridge this to your daily life. Try this 2-minute exercise right now. Close your eyes and notice your breath, not trying to change it, just tracing its path. Inhale, exhale. When thoughts about dinner plans or unpaid bills arise, and they will, picture them as leaves floating down a stream. Don't push them away, just let them drift past while you return to the breath. That gentle redirection, that Stoic mindfulness in action. You're not fighting distractions, you're practicing the art of coming back. Here's where ancient wisdom meets modern neuroscience. Every time you refocus on your breath, you're strengthening the brain's anterior cingulate cortex, the neural switchboard for attention. The Stoics didn't have fMRI machines, but they grasped the principle. Attention is a muscle. The more you exercise it on small things, the taste of your coffee, the weight of your feet on the floor, the stronger it becomes when life storms hit. Think of it like this: you wouldn't expect to deadlift 300 pounds without training. Why expect to stay calm in crisis if you've never trained your mind to stay present in calm? Tonight, test this with a mundane activity: washing dishes or folding laundry. Instead of rushing through, tune into the sensations, the warmth of the water, the texture of fabric. When your mind wanders to tomorrow's to-dos, guide it back without judgment. That simple act is revolutionary. You're not just doing dishes, you're dismantling the autopilot that hands your peace to every passing thought. The present moment, as the Stoics knew, isn't where life happens by default. It's where you choose to show up again and again, one breath at a time. Imagine standing in a marketplace where everything has a price except one stall that refuses to trade in coins. The merchant points to a sign: "Only virtue accepted here." That's the Stoic marketplace of life. While the world chases wealth, fame, and comfort, the Stoics built their entire philosophy on one radical idea: the only true good is the quality of your character. Everything else, money, health, even relationships, are preferred indifference, useful but incapable of making you virtuous or corrupt on their own. Marcus Aurelius, ruling the Roman Empire at its peak, wrote in his private journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." He wasn't dismissing external comforts. He was putting them in their proper place, as accessories to virtue, not replacements for it. Consider two co-workers passed over for the same promotion. One spirals into bitterness, convinced the system is rigged. The other reflects: did I act with integrity? Did I contribute my best? The outcome was identical, but their judgments created entirely different experiences. That's the Stoic edge. When you stop measuring your worth by uncontrollable externals, you become immune to life's roller coaster. Epictetus, born into slavery, put it bluntly: it's not what happens to you, but how you respond that defines you. Your boss's opinion, a preferred indifferent, the way you handle criticism, that's where your true power lies. Here's where modern self-help often gets it backward. We're told to chase happiness as if it's a trophy waiting at some finish line. The Stoics flipped that script. Happiness isn't the goal, it's the byproduct of living virtuously. Picture a nurse working grueling night shifts. The exhaustion is real, but so is the quiet pride in showing up for patients with compassion. That's virtue in action, not because it's easy, but because it aligns with something deeper than fleeting comfort. So how do you apply this today? Start by naming your core virtues, not the ones you think you should value, but the ones that resonate when you're at your best. Is it courage, fairness, curiosity? Write them down, then test them against recent challenges. When your neighbor's dog kept you awake all night, did patience or resentment win? When your idea was shot down in a meeting, did you respond with humility or defensiveness? These aren't moral quizzes, they're calibration tools. The more you act in harmony with your chosen virtues, the less power external chaos holds over your peace. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayals, wars, and plagues, yet his journals reveal a man constantly recentering on one question: what does virtue require here? Not how can I win, or why is this happening to me? That's the litmus test. Next time life throws you a curveball, a financial hit, a relationship strain, pause and ask that same question. The answer won't always be comfortable, but it will be yours, and that's how you build a life where no setback can shake your foundation. There's a reason the phrase "count to 10" has survived generations as anger management advice. It's ancient Stoic wisdom in disguise. Seneca, who wrote an entire book on anger's corrosive effects, called it the most hideous of emotions precisely because it bypasses reason. Anger, he warned, is like rushing headlong down a hill. Once it starts, it's almost impossible to stop. But here's what most people miss. The Stoic pause isn't just about suppressing emotion. It's about creating space between trigger and action where choice lives. That split-second delay is where you reclaim your power. Picture this: your partner says something that instantly raises your defenses. Your jaw clenches, your pulse quickens, everything in you wants to fire back. This is the critical juncture. Without the pause, you're on autopilot, reacting from old wounds or ingrained patterns. But when you insert even 5 seconds of stillness, literally counting 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, you shift from reactor to observer. Suddenly, you notice the heat in your chest, the script running through your mind. They always do this. And most importantly, the realization: I don't have to play this scene the same way again. The Stoics knew something modern neuroscience confirms. Emotions are chemical surges that peak within 90 seconds if left unchecked. Your body can't sustain anger or panic longer than that without you feeding it with thoughts. That's why Seneca advised his students to take a walk or wash your face at anger's first spark, not to avoid conflict, but to let the biochemical wave pass before engaging. Physical interruptions work because they disrupt the feedback loop between body and mind. Try this today. Choose a subtle anchor, touching your wrist, adjusting your ring, even taking a deliberate sip of water as your personal pause trigger. Let it remind you, between stimulus and response, there's always a gap, and in that gap lies your freedom. Here's the deeper layer the Stoics uncovered. The pause isn't passive. It's where you activate your most human trait, the ability to choose your interpretation. When someone cuts you off in traffic, the unpaused mind screams a jerk. The paused mind considers alternatives. Maybe they're rushing to the hospital. Even if they're not, that momentary generosity protects your peace more than theirs. Marcus Aurelius used this technique daily, writing, "The first rule is to keep an untroubled spirit. The second is to look things in the face and know them for what they are." That's what the pause offers, not denial, but clarity. Make this practice tangible. For the next week, pick one recurring friction point: a colleague's interruptions, your child's bedtime resistance, and institute a 10-second rule. Before speaking, feel your feet on the floor. Breathe into your ribs. Notice how often the urgent reaction wasn't necessary at all. Like training wheels for emotional mastery, these micro-pauses rewire your reflexes over time. Because here's the truth no one tells you: calm isn't something you are. It's something you do, one conscious pause at a time. History offers us masterclasses in emotional resilience through figures like Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, whose entire philosophy was born from catastrophe. Picture this: a wealthy merchant loses everything when his ship, loaded with precious cargo, sinks in a storm. Most people would crumble under that devastation. But Zeno, stranded in Athens with nothing, wandered into a bookstore where the works of Socrates were being read. Instead of drowning in self-pity, he turned disaster into destiny, asking the bookseller, "Where can I find a man like Socrates?" That question sparked a journey leading him to develop Stoicism. His shipwreck wasn't the end. It was the birthplace of a philosophy that would outlast empires. Centuries later, Epictetus carried that torch despite being born into slavery. Beaten so severely his leg was permanently damaged, he could have justified hatred or despair. Instead, he transformed his suffering into wisdom, teaching that circumstances don't make the man, they reveal him. Even when the Emperor Domitian banished all philosophers from Rome, Epictetus didn't rage against the injustice. He set up a school in Greece where students like the historian Arrian recorded his teachings. His life was proof: you don't control what happens to you, but you always control what happens within you. Now fast forward to modern times. Consider the composure of leaders like Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison yet emerged without bitterness, saying, "Resentment is like drinking poison and hoping it will kill your enemies." Or the astronaut Chris Hadfield, who trained himself to stay calm during potential space disasters by visualizing worst-case scenarios, a direct echo of the Stoic Premeditatio Malorum. These aren't superhumans, they're people who practiced emotional discipline until it became second nature. Who shapes your idea of resilience? Maybe it's a grandparent who endured hardship with quiet dignity, or a co-worker who handles crises with unshakable focus. Take a moment to reflect whose example makes you think, "I want to respond to life like that." Write down 3 names, historical, personal, or public figures, and note one trait you admire in each. Then ask yourself, how could you embody that quality in your next challenge? Because role models aren't just inspiration, they're blueprints. Zeno didn't know his shipwreck would inspire millions. Your struggles today could be the very thing someone else studies tomorrow as a lesson in strength. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the impediment to action advances action, a paradox that only makes sense when you realize obstacles aren't roadblocks, they're the road. Think of how fire transforms raw ore into steel. The metal doesn't become stronger despite the flames, it's because of them. Every time life presses you against something hot, a rejection, a failure, a loss, you're being given the same choice, to crumble or to temper. The Stoics didn't just endure hardship, they learned to lean into it like blacksmiths, shaping their character with every strike. Take a story you might recognize. A woman spends a decade climbing the corporate ladder, only to lose her job in a sudden layoff. At first, it feels like the world's ending until she realizes she's been handed a blank canvas. That disaster pushes her to freelance, discovering skills she'd buried under office politics. 2 years later, she's earning more doing work she loves. The layoff wasn't the tragedy she feared, it was the pivot she needed. This isn't sugarcoating pain, it's recognizing that growth rarely comes from comfort. Your current challenge holds that same potential. Maybe it's a strained relationship making you rethink boundaries, or a financial squeeze forcing creativity. The Stoic question isn't, "Why is this happening to me?" but "What can this reveal?" When a wildfire burns through a forest, ecologists don't see destruction. They see space for new seeds to take root. Your obstacles are those flames, that project that fell apart. It might be clearing space for something better suited to who you're becoming. Here's how to practice this today. Grab paper and write down one difficulty you're facing: a conflict, a setback, a fear. Now reframe it as if it's happening for you, not to you. If you're overwhelmed at work, maybe it's highlighting where to delegate. If a friendship's fading, perhaps it's making room for deeper connections. The key isn't denying the sting, it's trusting that even discomfort has purpose. History's most resilient people share one trait: they stopped asking for easier lives and started building stronger selves. Your toughest moments aren't detours, they're the forge. And you're not just the metal being shaped, you're the blacksmith. The Stoics spoke of an idealized figure called the sage, someone who'd perfected emotional mastery, untouched by irrational reactions, as steady as a mountain in a storm. But here's the crucial twist: even the greatest Stoic philosophers admitted they'd never met one. Seneca, who advised emperors, confessed in his letters that he still lost his temper, still felt envy, still needed daily reminders to practice what he preached. That's the paradox at the heart of Stoicism. We're drawn to the vision of unshakable calm, but the real power lies in embracing the messy, imperfect pursuit of it. Think of it like archery, as the Stoics often did. The sage is the bullseye, a target to aim for, knowing you'll rarely hit it dead center. What matters isn't perfection, but the discipline of drawing the bow again and again. Consider how we judge ourselves when we fall short. You meditate daily for a month, then miss a session and berate yourself as a failure. Or you stay patient through a dozen frustrations, only to snap at the 13th and declare all progress void. Seneca called this demanding the fruit from a sapling, expecting maturity before the roots have deepened. A musician doesn't abandon the piano because they fumble a chord. They slow down and play it again. Emotional mastery works the same way. Every lapse is data, not defeat. That moment when you catch yourself overreacting, that's not weakness, it's awareness growing. History gives us a raw example in Cato the Younger, the Stoic politician who famously opposed Julius Caesar. Even his enemies respected his integrity, yet Plutarch records moments where Cato's stubbornness tipped into rigidity, where his principles became performative. He wasn't the sager, he was human, but here's what made him remarkable. He kept returning to his ideals, not as a statue of virtue, but as a living, striving man. That's the real Stoic journey, not the absence of stumbles, but the refusal to let them end the walk. So how do we apply this today? Start by reframing your benchmarks. Instead of asking, "Did I stay perfectly calm today?" ask, "Did I notice my reactions sooner than yesterday?" Progress might look like catching your irritation after 3 sentences instead of 5, or recognizing an old trigger before it fully hooks you. These micro shifts compound. Picture 2 graphs, one jagged with daily ups and downs, the other a smooth upward curve. The first is reality, the second is an illusion. Growth isn't linear, it's a spiral where you revisit the same challenges with slightly more clarity each time. The sage ideal isn't meant to shame us, it's a compass. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one," he wasn't demanding perfection, he was urging action, however imperfect. So next time you fall short, hear Seneca's voice from 2,000 years ago. You're not worse off, you're just more aware. That's the gift of self-knowledge. The sage may never arrive, but the pursuit makes you wiser, kinder, and more resilient than you'd ever become by standing still. Even the most dedicated Stoic didn't walk the path alone. Picture ancient Athens, where Zeno gathered his students in the painted colonnade, the Stoa Poikile, that gave Stoicism its name. These weren't passive lectures. They were vibrant exchanges where merchants debated philosophers and slaves challenged senators. What made these circles revolutionary wasn't just the ideas, but the shared commitment to living them. Epictetus' school in Nicopolis operated the same way. Students held each other accountable, not with judgment but with fierce compassion. When one struggled with anger, the group didn't shame them. They asked, "What would virtue look like here?" That's the power of community. It turns philosophy from abstraction into lived truth. Fast forward to today, and that same spirit thrives in online Stoic forums, study groups, and even subreddits where thousands dissect Marcus Aurelius' journal entries as if they were written yesterday. There's something profound about strangers across time zones bonding over Seneca's letters or sharing how they applied Epictetus' wisdom during a layoff or breakup. These digital stoas serve the same purpose as their ancient counterparts, their mirrors reflecting our blind spots and cheerleaders for our growth. When you post about losing your temper and someone responds, what's the story you're telling yourself? That's modern-day Stoic fellowship in action, but here's where you can make it personal. Think of one insight from this video that resonated with you, maybe the view from above exercise or the discipline of assent. Now imagine discussing it with a friend over coffee, not lecturing but exploring. What happens when you try pausing before reacting? Or how might negative visualization change your Monday mornings? That simple conversation does two things. It deepens your understanding by putting words to your experience, and it creates accountability. Just as Musonius Rufus taught that philosophy is meaningless unless it improves how we eat, love, and work, sharing these ideas weaves them into the fabric of daily life. Consider how athletes train harder with teammates or how writers thrive in critique groups. Growth accelerates in company. The Stoics knew this. Even Marcus Aurelius, surrounded by the solitude of power, filled his journals with gratitude for mentors like Rusticus and Sextus. Your community might be a WhatsApp thread with two friends committing to weekly Stoic challenges, or a Discord server debating whether modern, preferred indifference include Wi-Fi and avocado toast. The format doesn't matter, the intention does. So here's your invitation: be the Zeno of your circle. Share one Stoic tool that shifted your perspective, then listen, really listen, to how it lands for others. You might find that teaching someone to ask, "Is this within my control?" strengthens your own resolve to live the answer. Because while Stoicism begins as self-mastery, it flourishes as shared light. And sometimes the surest way to hold yourself accountable is to let others see you trying. Stoicism distilled human excellence into four cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, not as abstract ideals, but as practical tools for navigating emotional triggers. Imagine these virtues as four lenses you can switch between when life throws you off balance. Wisdom isn't just knowledge, it's the ability to dissect a trigger and ask, what's really happening here? When your partner forgets an anniversary, wisdom pauses the hurt and investigates. Is this forgetfulness or a deeper pattern? Am I reacting to the present or old wounds? It's the flashlight in the dark, helping you separate facts from stories. Courage often gets mislabeled as the absence of fear. The Stoics saw it differently: it's action despite fear. Picture receiving harsh feedback that makes your palms sweat. Courage isn't pretending it doesn't sting. It's leaning into the discomfort and asking, what scrap of truth can I salvage here? History remembers Cotto not because he never flinched, but because he stood firm when bribes and threats came his way. Your everyday courage might look smaller: apologizing first, admitting you don't know, or walking away from a toxic argument, but it's the same muscle. Justice in Stoicism stretches beyond fairness to others. It's about integrity in how you treat yourself. When someone cuts you in line, justice balances two questions: do they deserve my anger? And do I deserve the cortisol spike this is causing? It's the virtue that whispers, you wouldn't let a stranger rent space in your head for free. Why let this incident live there? Marcus Aurelius modeled this daily, reminding himself to waste no more time arguing what a good man should be, and instead embody it even when others didn't reciprocate. Temperance might be the most countercultural virtue today. In a world that glorifies no limits, Stoic temperance asks, what's the right amount, not just of wine or spending, but of emotional investment? That colleague who thrives on drama, temperance chooses not to match their energy. The urge to check your phone every time anxiety whispers, temperance sets it down and breathes instead. It's not repression, it's recognizing that pouring gasoline on every spark burns you faster than it burns anyone else. Here's how to make these virtues tangible tomorrow. Pick one, just one, and let it guide a single interaction. If you choose courage, maybe it's asking for clarification instead of stewing over vague criticism. If it's temperance, perhaps you pause before firing off that sarcastic text. Wisdom might mean replaying a conflict to identify your own role in it. while justice could mean giving someone the benefit of the doubt even when they didn't earn it. The goal isn't perfection, it's practice. Like a blacksmith tempering steel, each small act of virtue strengthens your resilience. And over time, what feels deliberate becomes instinct, until one day, you realize your triggers don't pull you nearly as hard as they used to. The Stoics might seem like the last philosophers you'd associate with laughter after all. They're known for their serious pursuit of virtue and emotional control. But here's the twist: they understood the power of humor better than most. Take Democritus, the ancient thinker known as the laughing philosopher, who wandered the streets chuckling at human folly. While others fumed over petty grievances, he saw the absurdity in how seriously we take ourselves. The Stoics didn't dismiss this approach, they refined it. For them, humor wasn't about mockery, it was perspective distilled into a grin. When you stub your toe or spill coffee on your shirt, the choice isn't just between anger and resignation. There's a third option: recognizing the cosmic joke that something so small could feel so monumental in the moment. Picture this: you're rushing out the door, already late, when you knock over a full glass of water onto important papers. Your first instinct might be to curse or slam your fist on the table. But what if instead you paused and channeled Democritus? What if you laughed at the sheer predictability of life's tiny sabotages? The Stoics wouldn't suggest you ignore the frustration, they'd invite you to interrogate it. Why does a spilled glass or a missed train feel like a personal affront? Because secretly, we expect the universe to cater to our plans. Humor punctures that illusion. It's not about denying annoyance, it's about shrinking it down to its true size. Marcus Aurelius hinted at this when he wrote, "How ridiculous and how strange to be surprised at anything which happens in life." He wasn't advocating indifference, he was pointing out how often we treat minor hiccups as epic tragedies. Think of the last time you watched a toddler melt down over a broken cookie. That's us, just with grown-up problems. The Stoic shift happens when you spot the cookie moment in your own reactions. The delayed flight, the rude comment, the Wi-Fi that chooses the worst possible time to fail. These aren't calamities. They're opportunities to exercise what Seneca called the art of stepping back. And sometimes stepping back reveals the irony that's been there all along. Here's your challenge: pick one annoyance from today, a long line, a misplaced item, a tech glitch, and try on Democritus' perspective. Imagine observing the scene from a distance, as if it were happening to a character in a sitcom. What's the punchline? Maybe it's the sheer universality of the frustration, or the way your outrage outweighs the offense. The goal isn't to fake amusement, but to uncover the lightness hidden under the weight of your initial reaction. Because when you can laugh at life's hiccups, you're not just managing emotions, you're mastering them. And that's the Stoic secret. Sometimes the most profound wisdom comes with a smile. Seneca's piercing observation on the shortness of life cuts to the core of our modern dilemma. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Think about that for a moment. The average human lives around 30,000 days, a number that seems vast until you subtract the hours lost to sleep, work, and trivial distractions. What remains is shockingly finite. Yet how much of that precious time do we surrender to petty grievances? The co-worker who takes credit for your idea, the slow driver in the fast lane, the passive-aggressive comment on social media, each one a tiny thief stealing minutes you'll never reclaim. The Stoic question isn't, "Why does this bother me?" but, "Is this worth the lifespan I'm trading for it?" Picture this: you're stuck in line at the DMV, fuming as the clerk moves at glacial speed. Your body tenses, your breath shortens. You're literally aging yourself over something you can't control. Now imagine Seneca whispering in your ear. You're exchanging a piece of your one irreplaceable life for this frustration. Is the trade fair? That's the power of his lens. When you measure emotional reactions against the yardstick of mortality, most shrink to insignificance. The barrister who messed up your order, not worth 10 minutes of your 70-year allotment. The neighbor's barking dog, a footnote in the story of your existence. This isn't about becoming emotionally numb. It's about triaging your reactions like a Stoic physician. Seneca diagnosed the human condition with brutal clarity. We are in the habit of acting as if life were never ending. That delusion lets us squander energy on inconsequential battles. But when you truly internalize life's brevity, your priorities sharpen. The same person who erupts over a delayed package might calmly navigate a medical crisis because suddenly the stakes clarify what deserves their emotional currency. Try this experiment tonight. Grab a notebook and divide a page into 2 columns. Label the first today's triggers. List every annoyance, from the trivial spilled coffee to the substantial work conflict. In the second column, estimate the time and mental space each consumed. Now ask, if this were my last year, would I still allocate resources this way? The exercise isn't meant to shame you. It's designed to reveal mismatches between your values and your reactions. You might discover that the 30 minutes spent fuming over a parking ticket could have been 30 minutes laughing with your kid. Seneca's wisdom holds a paradox. Confronting life's shortness doesn't diminish joy, it intensifies it. When you stop donating your limited days to minor irritations, you free up reserves for what truly lights you up. That's the Stoic art of emotional economy. Spending your heartbeats as wisely as your paycheck, because time, unlike money, can't be earned back. Every moment spent in bitterness is a withdrawal from an account that never refills. So the next time irritation flares, pause and hear Seneca's reminder. Life is long if you know how to use it. The traffic jam won't shorten, but your reaction can. The rude comment won't vanish, but its hold on you might. And in that space between what happens and how you respond, you'll find something extraordinary. Not just more time, but a life that feels deeper, richer, and unmistakably yours. Morning light filters through your window, and before you reach for your phone or dive into the day's chaos, the Stoics would invite you to do something radical. Sit with discomfort. Premeditatio Malorum, the practice of mentally rehearsing potential challenges, wasn't designed to breed pessimism. It was a cognitive vaccine against life's inevitable surprises. Picture this: as you sip your coffee, you visualize your commute derailed by traffic, your presentation interrupted by tech glitches, your patience tested by a colleague's sharp tone. But here's the key: you don't stop at the worst-case scenario. You strategize. If the train's delayed, you'll listen to that podcast you've saved. If the projector fails, you'll pivot to a whiteboard sketch. This ritual isn't about dwelling on disaster. It's about inoculating yourself against panic by proving, in advance, that you can adapt. Marcus Aurelius perfected this at dawn, writing, "Begin each day by telling yourself, today I shall meet interference, ingratitude, insolence, not to complain, but to preemptively disarm them." Now fast forward to evening. The Stoics didn't just end their days, they decoded them. Journaling wasn't diary-style venting, it was forensic self-review. Imagine holding up your day like a prism, examining each facet under the light of virtue. Seneca's nightly ritual involved 3 questions. What did I do well today? Where did I fall short? What will I improve tomorrow? Not as a guilt trip, but as a mechanic checks an engine, diagnosing to optimize. Your version might look simpler. Jot down 1 trigger you handled with clarity, 1 reaction you'd like to refine, and 1 small win, like pausing before snapping at your partner. The magic lies in the consistency. Over weeks, patterns emerge. Maybe your frustration spikes when you skip lunch, or your patience thins after scrolling social media. These aren't flaws, they're data points for crafting a more intentional life. You don't need to adopt both rituals at once. Start with the one that resonates. If mornings feel rushed, try the evening journal. If you're facing a high-stakes week, test Premeditatio Malorum while brushing your teeth. The goal isn't perfection, it's presence. Like a musician practicing scales, these rituals train your mind to default to resilience when life improvises. And here's the beautiful paradox: by preparing for obstacles, you'll encounter fewer of them. Not because the world changes, but because your capacity to navigate it does. Think of these practices as emotional stretching. Just as a yoga gently coaxes tight muscles to loosen, Stoic rituals flex your adaptability. They carve a space between stimulus and response where choice lives, where a cancelled flight becomes reading time, or a criticism morphs into curiosity. That's the alchemy of ritual. It transforms philosophy from concept into reflex, and the more you return to it, the less you'll need to think about it. One day, you'll catch yourself smiling at a mishap that once would have ruined your afternoon and realize the practice has become second nature. That's when you'll know you're not just studying Stoicism. You're living it. Epictetus once warned his students, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. That insight cuts straight to the heart of our digital age, where every scroll through social media can feel like walking through an emotional minefield. One moment you're admiring a friend's vacation photos, the next you're knee-deep in comparison, measuring your ordinary Tuesday against their highlight reel. But here's what the Stoics understood long before algorithms existed. The screen doesn't force envy upon you. It simply holds up a mirror to beliefs already whispering in your mind. That pang you feel when someone posts their promotion isn't about their success, it's about the unexamined story you're telling yourself about your own progress. Consider how we interact with technology today. Your phone buzzes with a notification a colleague liked someone else's post but ignored yours. Instantly, your pulse quickens. The ancient Stoics would recognize this as a classic case of mistaking external validation for self-worth. Just as Epictetus taught that we can't control others' opinions but only our attachment to them, digital Stoicism asks, why outsource your sense of adequacy to a thumbs-up icon? The solution isn't deleting all your accounts unless that serves you, but changing how you engage with them. Start by auditing your digital inputs like a Stoic curator. Follow accounts that inspire thoughtful reflection, not just reactive emotions. Mute the influencer whose perfect life triggers your insecurity, not out of avoidance, but because you refuse to pay attention to what doesn't serve your growth. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts," he couldn't have imagined Twitter threads or Instagram stories. Yet his wisdom applies perfectly. Every time you open an app, you're essentially choosing which thoughts to let cross the threshold of your mind. That co-worker who constantly posts humble brags about their productivity. They're not causing your frustration. Your silent rule that everyone should be modest is. The Stoic move isn't to resent their posts, but to examine why they hook you. Maybe it reveals a hidden insecurity about your own work ethic, or perhaps it's a cue to question why you equate busyness with worth. Try this experiment for the next 3 days. Before opening any social platform, ask Epictetus' question. Is this essential, not in terms of time management, but emotional economy? Scroll with intentionality, pausing when content stirs strong reactions. That viral rant triggering your outrage, sit with the discomfort and ask, what would change if I didn't engage? You might discover that most digital provocations are like firecrackers, loud in the moment, but leaving no trace once the smoke clears. And when you do choose to interact, let it be from choice, not compulsion, commenting because you genuinely have something to add, not because the platform's design baited you into reacting. The real power of digital stoicism lies in recognizing that every like, comment, and share is modern-day clay on the wheel of your attention. You can't control what others mold, but you absolutely decide which pieces deserve display in the gallery of your mind. So the next time you catch yourself falling into comparison or irritation online, hear Epictetus' voice cutting through 20 centuries. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. Your peace was never meant to be hostage to a refresh button. The Stoic Fork presents a deceptively simple choice. When life hands you a challenge, you either take constructive action or practice serene acceptance, with no third option. Cleans, the second leader of the Stoic school, captured this perfectly with his metaphor of a dog tied to a moving cart. The dog has two choices: trot willingly alongside the cart or be dragged. There's no scenario where the cart stops just because the dog resists. Modern life is full of these cart situations we can't control but must navigate. Take air travel, where storms and mechanical delays turn schedules into suggestions. You could spend hours fuming at the gate agent, refreshing the airline app like a slot machine, or you could pull out a book and reclaim that time as your own. The delay hasn't changed, but your relationship to it has. This fork isn't about passivity, it's about precision. Imagine your boss suddenly changes a project deadline. The Stoic response starts with a diagnostic question. Can I influence this? If yes, action takes the lead, negotiating for more time, reorganizing priorities, or delegating tasks. If no, acceptance becomes the tool, not resignation, but conscious adaptation. Maybe you use the compressed timeline to sharpen your focus, or view it as a chance to prove your agility. The key is recognizing when you're the dog straining against the cart versus the one adjusting its stride. Here's where most of us get stuck: the phantom third option, rumination. We mistake worrying about a problem for addressing it. Fretting over a friend's lukewarm text response doesn't clarify their feelings, it just drains your afternoon. Obsessing about a health scare before test results arrive doesn't prevent illness, it steals present moment peace. The Stoic Fork slices through this illusion. Either schedule the doctor's appointment, action, or release the hypotheticals until you have data acceptance. Anything else is emotional interest paid on a debt that may not even come due. Try this today. Identify one current challenge: a strained relationship, a work obstacle, a personal goal that stalled. Now apply the fork. Can you directly impact the situation? List concrete steps, however small. If it's truly outside your control, design an acceptance strategy. Maybe it's a mantra like, "This is my cart right now," or redirecting energy to what you can shape. The fork's power lies in its either slash or clarity. It doesn't eliminate discomfort, but it eliminates wasted effort. And when you stop wrestling with immovable objects, you preserve strength for the battles you can actually win. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What we do now echoes in eternity," a reminder that every moment of self-mastery isn't just about weathering today's storm, but about altering the climate of every interaction that follows. Think of a parent who grew up in a household where shouting was the default language of frustration. When their own child spills a drink, they feel that familiar heat rise, but instead of erupting, they kneel down and say, "Let's clean it together." In that pause, they're not just managing a trigger, they're rewriting a legacy. The Stoics understood this chain reaction better than anyone. Your emotional responses aren't isolated events. They're blueprints others unconsciously follow, especially those who look up to you. Consider how workplace cultures form. One leader lashes out under pressure, and soon entire teams mirror that same tension in their own communication. But when someone consistently responds to chaos with level-headed clarity, that becomes the new watermark. History remembers Epictetus not because he never felt anger, he was human, but because he modeled how to transmute it into wisdom that outlasted empires. Your daily victories over impatience or resentment might seem small, but they compound like interest in an emotional bank account future generations will draw from. This legacy lens changes everything. That text message you're itching to fire off in anger, it's not just about this moment, it's about the kind of communicator you're training yourself to become. The way you handle a stranger's rudeness today shapes how your children will handle conflict tomorrow. Seneca observed, "We are mirrors to each other's souls," and nowhere is that more true than in the silent curriculum of emotional discipline. Every time you choose understanding over retaliation or patience over irritation, you're not just solving a problem, you're planting trees under whose shade you may never sit. So tonight, as you reflect on the day's triggers, ask yourself, what echoes am I sending into the future, not with grand gestures, but through those split-second choices that reveal who we truly are? Because the Stoic legacy isn't carved in marble, it's woven into the fabric of ordinary moments, where the best of who we were becomes the foundation for who others dare to be. We've traveled through the Stoic toolkit together, from the razor-sharp dichotomy of control that separates what's yours to command from what isn't, to cognitive distancing, that life-saving pause between trigger and reaction where freedom lives. We've practiced Premeditatio Malorum, not to dwell on darkness but to walk through imagined storms until they lose their power to shock. Each of these tools shares one purpose: to reveal that emotional triggers aren't your enemies. They're invitations, daily chances to exercise Stoic principles like a musician rehearsing scales. The rude comment, the missed bus, the stressful email, these aren't interruptions to your peace. They're the very material for creating it. Consider how differently life unfolds when you see frustrations through this lens. That neighbor's barking dog, no longer just a noise nuisance, but a reminder to practice acceptance. The colleague who takes credit for your idea, not merely an office frustration, but a test of your ability to act with justice while releasing attachment to recognition. Even grief in time becomes a masterclass in Amofati, the art of loving what fate brings, not because it's painless, but because it's part of the human contract we all sign at birth. Seneca, who faced exile, chronic illness, and political betrayal, left us with perhaps the most potent summary of all. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. That's the Stoic revolution in a single sentence. Your triggers don't create your suffering, your judgments about them do. But here's the hopeful twist: if the mind can build cages, it can also forge keys. Every time you choose curiosity over reactivity, perspective over panic, you're not just managing emotions, you're remodeling your inner world. Now it's your turn. Which of these Stoic tools will you take for a test drive first? Maybe you'll start small, using cognitive distancing when a minor irritation arises, watching your reaction like a scientist observing a fascinating phenomenon. Or perhaps you'll go straight to the deep end with Premeditatio Malorum, mentally rehearsing a feared scenario until it feels more like a challenge than a threat. The beauty of Stoicism is that there's no wrong entry point. Every principle circles back to the same truth. Peace isn't the absence of storms, but the ability to dance in the rain. So tell me in the comments, which Stoic practice will you weave into your days? Will it be the dichotomy of control, helping you redirect energy to what you can change? Or Amofati, transforming obstacles into fuel, Remember, the philosophers we've quoted weren't statues of perfection. They were flesh and blood humans who woke up grumpy, made mistakes, and kept practicing. Your journey starts where theirs did, with a single choice to see triggers not as things that happen to you, but to you for growth. The tools are in your hands now. The rest, that's your story.